If anyone back home ever reads this, just know we did all we could. This planet is, well, it's something else. For posterity, I should probably recount everything that's unfolded over the past couple of days. I think, at least. I'm honestly not even sure anymore thanks to the day-night cycle here. Hell is not even a cycle. Day is practically non-existent. We just get dim light reflected off the twin moons up above. It's like an ever-present state of dusk. We were flying by the pillars of creation, an exploration mission hoping to find habitable worlds somewhere out there beyond our own. It's beautiful out here, but we haven't had much luck with the habitable worlds part. Mostly just a lot of stars everywhere. The occasional small moon that was a rock of dust and ice. Nothing we could live on though. Nevertheless, the 5 of us soldiered on. Myself, Vitali, Parsons, Jacoby and Milich, floating through space in search of a new world. Looking back, it feels like this planet was waiting for us, like an ambush almost. It was nowhere on the radars, not on any kind of existing star charts. But suddenly, as we were flying at insane speeds through space, it just appeared. It makes no damn sense. But suddenly, there's an asteroid belt surrounding us, this massive planet off to our port side, and debris hitting the hull of the ship. We lost it, started spinning out with next to no control. I woke up to find the others still passed out in the bridge, all of us hastily strapped into our seats. Somehow, by the grace of whatever God was looking out for us, we were all alive. Honestly, at this point, I'm convinced we all died on impact and were really just in some form of hell. But it seems like an even more ridiculous thought than what we have seen. It took a couple of hours to get out and sift through the wreckage of our ship, though there wasn't a whole lot we were able to salvage. Our pressurized suits weren't damaged, and the oxygen recyclers on them were in good shape. That would last us at least a week. Food supplies were more abundant, so we packed up whatever we could. While Parsons and Jacoby loaded up supplies, the rest of us went out to get bearings on where we were. Darkness was about all we got, visibility limited in almost every direction. The ship was split in two right down the middle. Cargo hold and crew quarters separated out from the bridge, engine, and cockpit that made up the 4. With some work, we figured we could still get power through from the main systems, using one of the cargo rooms as basically an airlock so we could still use the living quarters. Not the worst outcome, all things considered. Getting into the living quarters meant that we were able to access some of our research gear though, and that's the only reason we've lasted this long. I found a set of night vision binoculars for land surveying and climbed up to the top of the ship for a view. Giant rock formations were off directly ahead of the ship. Huge, carved, jagged rocks jutting off into the sky in rows. They look like giant ribcage sticking up out of the sand. The corpse of something that lived here long ago. That's just speculation on my part though, and a lot of fear for what may be waiting for us. The strangest thing though, there's a forest, about 50 clicks to the starboard side of the ship. Straight off into the distance are a ton of trees, massive from the looks of it. Reminds me of those huge trees in Jurassic Park, and I half expected to see a dino knocking them down as it went along its way. Dinosaurs would probably be too good of a discovery for us at this point. We put a pin in the forest for now, choosing instead to work on getting our bearings on where we were. Hours had passed at this point, so we all piled into the crew quarters and sealed it up, hoping to get some kind of rest and fill our bellies. Despite the bleakness of our situation, we were hopeful. A distress signal was on its way back to Earth. We had food, so we wouldn't starve, and the oxygen cycler was still working, so we had a little bit of light in the darkness. No impending doom. We were all asleep in our bunks when the first sounds began. I thought it was wind at first, just a really strong storm of gusts running across the barren tundra we were situated on. I could hear dust skittering across the hall outside, trying to find a way in through any unsealed cracks in the metal. Parsons woke up around the same time, looking over at me with the same questions I had, though it's not like either of us had any kind of answers. All we could do was try to tune it out and get some actual sleep. But it was fitful. I couldn't help but feel like something out there was trying to get inside, cracking the ship open like a damned shellfish to get at the meat hiding within. It kept going for hours. Even looking out the window, I couldn't tell what the hell was going on. Just that permanent state of dusk outside. Sand and loose rocks occasionally flying by the glass. The remains of the ship started to creak and moan under the pressure of the wind, sounding like they would fall apart at any moment. Finally though, just when I thought I was going to lose my damn mind, it stopped. I was finally able to get some real sleep. Too bad it was interrupted. Vitaly woke us all up, screaming about something incomprehensible. By the time we were able to get her to calm down, she was babbling about how something needed to be let out, that it was waiting for us. It took nearly an hour to get her to chill the hell out. Not that we could get any clear answers from her after that either. She just went quiet, nearly catatonic. The rest of us eventually had to get on with what we were doing and try to make ship repairs. Parsons and I put on our habitat suits, exiting the makeshift airlock and setting up a few lights around the wreckage to see what we were doing. The big problem came when we realized the internal seal was cracked, right between the cockpit area and where it should snap back on near the cargo hold. Without that, the vacuum of space would just rip us right out of the can as soon as we got up there. Didn't have too long to ruminate on what that meant though. Parsons was tapping me on the shoulder, barely giving a whisper as he tried to get my attention. I set down my welding torch, looking back to find that our lights had attracted something to us. It was dark beyond the small circle of light we had set up, but something was out there moving, stalking us from the dense black beyond. For a brief moment, I swear I saw eyes flaming in the darkness, sizing us up for a meal. I hesitated for a moment, weighing the options and considering that I may be just going crazy from crashing on a desolate planet. But the other side of me thought about the real implications. There's life here. Not only life, but something intelligent. The realization hit me like a brick wall next though. The revelation that we're not the top of the food chain out here. We might be near the bottom. The two of us hauled ass back toward the airlock, desperately banging on the door for those inside to open up. I could hear it behind us, just on the edge of the light. I think that's the only thing that kept it from diving right at us, ripping our throats out with whatever gnarled teeth were hidden in the dark. Probably wasn't used to this amount of light. It felt like we were banging on that airlock forever before Millich finally opened the door. Just in time too, because the thing out there finally decided to chance it, making a huge leap forward just as we fell through the door. If that's the extent of it, we would have been lucky. Parsons was too slow though. As he went through, the thing clamped down on his leg, dragging him backward. He held onto the doorway, begging for me to help as I collapsed to the floor, desperately trying to gather any nerve I could to offer him a hand. I finally got it, diving forward, grabbing his arm and trying to haul him back, bring him into the safety of the ship wreckage. Whatever had him, it didn't let up. Instead, I heard a crunch as it bit down harder on Parsons' leg, jerking him backwards more forcefully. I tried. I really did, but it was too much. My grasp on his arm slipped for just the second that thing needed, and he was gone, screaming into the night. The door closed as Millich pressed the button inside, depressurizing the airlock and opening it from his end. Swear I could hear bones crunching from outside as it chowed down on Parsons. His screams didn't last for long, so I'm hoping he didn't have to feel the worst of it. Vitaly started saying a lot of weird shit when I got back in. Said that thing was sent to punish us, motivate us to get moving. Kept going on about how we had a duty to something greater than ourselves being here. I honestly don't know if she started legitimately going insane or had some kind of brain trauma from the crash. It's eerie though, to say the least. Her last warning was only a couple of hours ago, and it didn't bode well. She says that its enemies are going to try to kill us. So what do we do? I ask, looking at Millich and Jacoby, trying to come up with some sort of answer. I've been hearing noises from outside since her last warning. It's like whistles and hisses, something conversing with others in the darkness in a language that's primordial to human tongues. I don't know what they're saying to each other, but I know it's not good for us. At all. Millich shrugged at me. Jacoby looked almost dead in the dim light of the crew quarters, just staring straight ahead. I had some kind of hope we were gonna go home, but he sighed. I don't know, man. I think we're fucked in here. Can't just give up like that though. Millich offered back. We have to go. Vitaly spoke again. That's what it told me we had to do. It told you? I'm sorry. Who the fuck is it? Jacoby was almost yelling at her in anger. She shrunk back, staring hard at him in defiance. God. she whispered. "She's lost her damn mind," Milich muttered. I stopped listening to them when I felt it, a deep rumbling that was barely shaking the wreckage we were in at first, but it started gathering steam. They quit their bickering after a moment, pausing to notice as it began to rattle portions of the crew quarters, making the entire structure shake like the planet itself was quaking underneath us. It kept out, rhythmic, growing more intense with every beat, until all of a sudden, nothing. Didn't realize I was holding my breath until it was knocked out of me with the force of being hit by a truck. 1 second, I'm looking at the others. The next second, we're all upside down, tumbling through empty space as the ship spins around us. Landing hurt like hell, getting thrown against the metal cabinet face first and briefly knocked out. But once everything stopped spinning, we had a whole new problem to deal with. The window nearby broke in the chaos, a gaping hole in the place of the formerly thick glass. I held my breath again, desperately trying to get up, making my way toward the hab suit kept near the airlocks. I made it 2 steps before something tore the roof of the remains of the ship, exposing all of us to the darkness outside. I could see what did it in the faint glow of our emergency lights. It was huge, towering above the wrecked remains of our ship. Pale, waxy white skin looked like it was ready to slough off the bone at any moment. Bulbous red eyes and clusters on top of its head, looking down at us. There was burning in its eyes, like a small flame was kindled somewhere in the back of the skull, showing through hundreds of bright red windows to the outside. Looking at it felt like touching madness, and to hold onto my sanity, I looked away, a scream wrenching itself from my gut and through the air. Off instinct, I took a deep breath in, and my lungs stopped shrieking in agony for a moment. I don't know why I didn't put it together until now, but if there was a forest off in the distance, it's not entirely impossible there might be oxygen here. My fear of whatever the hell was going on was briefly eclipsed by elation that we had, in fact, discovered a habitable planet. Then my fear came roaring back as this thing reached down a pale bony hand, 7 long fingers unfurled, spikes inside the knuckles glistening as it grasped at Milich on the ground, grabbing him up and lifting high. I sat in stunned silence, watching as it hoisted Milich above its head, curling in the long fingers and squeezing. I heard his bones crack as the creature tightened its grip, suffocating him and crushing any internal organs that may have still been standing. The interior spikes did their jobs, puncturing him and cutting his screams off like a balloon losing air as blood began to pour down, drenching the creature as it opened a long vertical mouth full of teeth to drink the life force down. "Run!" I shouted at Vitaly and Jacoby, taking our chance as the thing was already busy devouring our former crewmate. We took off, leaving the dim lights of the wreckage behind and taking off, nothing in hand, towards the forested area. We ran, not stopping for a moment to look back and see if we were being followed, just assuming that if we did hesitate, it would grab us and squeeze, just like it did to Milich. After some time, we eventually slowed, beginning to run out of steam despite the hospitable conditions of the planet. Maybe it was the fact I've been running on stored oxygen for so long, but I think the atmosphere here might be more dense with it than our own. I felt more energized, like everything was clearer. Then again, maybe it's the adrenaline from seeing that fucking nightmare back there. For hours on hours, we walked. Vitaly didn't speak of her dreams anymore, and Jacoby and I just... well, there wasn't much to say with everything going on, so we just walked, and kept on walking. My feet were bleeding in my boots by the time we hit the forest, but we weren't going to risk stopping and having another one of those things come after us. Instead, we just stumbled alone, keeping our aches and pains quiet out of some misguided belief that we could still survive all of this. Not gonna lie, despite the fear that was driving me forward, I really wanted to stop and get a good look at what these trees were. No way they could be native species from Earth, of course. But were they similar in any way? The branches I brushed past almost felt like they had pine needles on them, but they were softer to the touch and thicker than the average pine needle. I didn't stop to really get an idea of them though, instead opting to keep moving, pressing forward through the darkness of the forest. "Any idea where we're supposed to go?" I asked, speaking to nobody in particular. "The city will be through here," Vitaly mentioned. Jacoby stopped in his tracks then. "Okay, you need to start telling us what the hell you know. Now for fuck's sake," he shouted at her. "Dude, chill out for a second. Don't take this out on her," I said. "No, she's been saying cryptic shit since we first got here, and I'm tired of it. It's like a bad fucking horror movie, man. Where's she pulling this from?" He was starting to shout now. "I don't know. It talks to me," she shouted back. "What? What the hell is talking to you out there?" he was screaming. "I don't know," she screams back. A rustling in the trees cuts their conversation short. We all go quiet, waiting to hear what the hell this place has in store for us next, but are only met with silence. "We need to keep moving," I mutter. The others agree, though they're not happy about it. We get a move on, proceeding on the same path through the forest, trying not to walk in circles as best as we can. "So what the hell are we supposed to do when we get to this city?" Jacoby asks, shooting a dirty look at Vitaly through the thick darkness. "Wish I knew. I think it wants us to free it, but I don't know what the hell it needs to be freed from," she shrugged back. "I didn't choose this, man. I fell asleep after we got here and suddenly this thing is just, I don't know, in my dreams, it feels like my mind is being totally overloaded." Jacoby doesn't say anything as he trails behind both of us, me in the lead, Vitaly in the middle. "Sorry," he eventually mutters. "All good. We're all stressed. We just want to get out of here," I said, trying to keep some sense of morale going. Breaks in the trees gave way to a beautiful sight above us. The sky was full of stars, all from another galaxy invisible to the naked eye back on Earth. The pillars of creation were huge in the sky. Glorious blues, pinks, greens, so many colors coalescing into something bigger than themselves. We all ended up stopping for a moment just to gaze in wonder at our own insignificance. At least, if we don't make it out, I got a once-in-a-lifetime experience, I guess. The silent awe was broken by rustling in the trees, something coming to the edge of the clearing we were in to watch us. Through the darkness, I strained my eyes, hoping to see whatever the hell was stalking us. I knelt down, trying to find a stick, a rock, anything that could help defend us against what may be waiting to pounce at any moment. I was running blind though, feeling over the ground with only the slightest hope that I would find something that could work. A rock came into my grasp, and with a little digging to get it from the dirt below, I was able to heft it beside me. Whatever was watching us must have sensed my intention though. A guttural hiss coming through the trees made me think of Jurassic Park again hearing it, the guttural sounds of a raptor or something stalking prey in the darkness. God, I wish it had been a fucking dinosaur. The thing walked into the clearing then, squaring up to the challenge. Through the dim light, I was finally able to get a look at it. Tall. That was the first thing I clocked. This thing was standing on 3 feet. No, 2. There was a long tail resting on the ground behind it, giving the appearance of something greater. It was at least 9 feet though, towering over all of us as it stared us down. The same pale waxy skin as that bigger one that destroyed the ship wreckage, with red eyes dotting the skull all over, giving it sight in what I assume was nearly 360 degrees of visibility. 2 long spindly arms were raised in front of it, long fingers covered in jagged spikes that were made for tearing flesh straight from bone. The mouth, it was more like a beak, jagged and sharp, but with no teeth behind it. Instead, it opened up to make another noise, and I could see a barbed tongue inside, unfurling like a damned whip ready to crack at us. Another guttural hiss, and it did just that, the tongue actually making a crack sound as it lashed out, hitting Jacoby on the neck. It only took seconds for the blood to start pouring from where it struck, painting the ground crimson in the darkness. He fell to the ground, clutching at the wound, desperate to make the bleeding stop, but to no avail. Jacoby was a lost cause. I clocked that immediately. I feel guilty for leaving him behind, but it was survival. I had to keep moving. As he clutched his throat on his knees in the dirt of the clearing, I pushed Vitaly forward, moving her along the path we were on to reach the other side of the forest. It's the only way I knew to get the hell out of here. The only way to live just a little longer. God, I want to live. I don't want to die here on this fucking planet full of terrors. His scream came out garbled as the thing jumped on him, grabbing him with those long spiked fingers and tearing at his skin with its beak. His screams didn't end as we pushed through foliage, desperately hoping to find an end to the trees and whatever this city was that we were looking for. Finally, we made it far enough that we couldn't hear the gurgling of his cries anymore, or the hissing of the thing as it drank his blood. The last image I saw through the trees was it wrapping that long whip-like tongue around him, using it to constrict his body as it lapped up his blood straight from the source. Run. Just keep running. Dear God, keep running. It was still back there, waiting to devour us the moment we slowed down. God forbid there'd be more than one of them back there, just biding their time until we stopped moving so it could have a nice meal of its own. There was a faint light coming from ahead, through the tree line, a bright blue glow like nothing I had seen, almost neon in the intensity. It was beckoning us towards it, out of the forest, into what I could only pray was some kind of safety. As we broke the tree line, it became visible in full glory. There was a cliff in front of us, a river flowing over the side and continuing down below, leading to a huge glowing blue cluster of spires only a few miles away. It was beautiful, like a rock quarry of nothing but the most brilliant diamonds and sapphires, giving us a beacon in the dark world. "There it is," Vitaly whispered. "That's the city?" I asked, looking over the edge of the cliff with unease. There wasn't going to be any easy way down. It was maybe 40 meters from our position to the water below, and no guarantee that it wasn't just filled with rocks under a thin layer of water. The river was rushing by us, thundering down the cliffside with enough force to flatten anything that got caught in it. Vitaly only gave me a nod in response, seeing the same predicament as we weighed our options. The cliffside was too sheer to climb down, no good footholds or anything. There was only one thing we could do. Our choice was practically made for us by rustling in the tree line further back. The creature had found us again, the low whistles and growls coming from its throat, signaling that it was back on the hunt. Something was making it stick to the tree line though, not expose itself outright like back in the clearing. Through the slight glow, I could see 24 of red eyes, small like rubies, staring from the wall of a dark mine, giving me a look that screamed of hunger. "We gotta risk it," I said, pulling Vitaly closer to the cliff edge, carefully made our way along the waterline, careful not to slip on any loose rocks and take a chance being pulled in by the current. Jesus, I don't even know if this is water. Hopefully, it's not some kind of acid that's going to burn our skin off. The loud hiss of the creature brought me out of any worries about what we were jumping into. Acid bath was a pretty good alternative to what I had seen this thing and others like it do to my friends since we crashed on this godforsaken planet. Try to hit the water at a right angle. Keep your legs straight, but do not lock your knees. Got it? Don't tense up. Ever been in a car crash? I asked her, leading us to the edge, right where the water began to fall over. "A fender bender back in high school," she muttered, staring down in total fear. The trees behind us started to crack over the roaring of the waterfall. "This is gonna hurt more. Deep breath," I said, grabbing her and pushing both of us into the air as far over the edge as we could possibly go. Our bodies cleared the waterfall, frothy waters below speeding towards us as we approached. I straightened my body out, unable to force my head over to look at Vitaly and see if she was doing the same. I just had to trust her. "Okay, don't tense up. Hit the water, then float back to the surface." It felt like hitting a brick wall after being thrown through the windshield of a car. Even hitting feet first didn't stop the pain of the water taking over the rest of my body. It threw me around, twisting in the current as it took hold of me, dragging me further down the river. Tried keeping a hand on Vitaly, but could barely tell where I even was, much less where she could be as the roaring waters ripped her from my grasp. It took a moment to get myself right, but I eventually struggled to the surface, not fighting against the current, but moving with it, trying to make my way towards a more shallow area. Vitaly thankfully had the same idea. We both got up on the left bank of the river around the same time, sputtering and coughing to try and catch our breath, but alive nonetheless. The thing was up above on the cliffside still, giving those whistle growls, this time filled with anger and rage. It definitely wasn't happy about missing out on 2 more meals. I think it may have gotten a taste for human after devouring Jacoby. In the one bit of good events that I'm going to hang on to and cherish with the most fleeting joy I can find, the river was actually drinkable water. I didn't do this experiment intentionally, instead just going off the amounts I accidentally swallowed while trying to get to the riverbank. But I was going to take whatever small victory I could get. We were both dehydrated by this point, and water when you're dehydrated tastes like the finest fucking wine I've ever had, even if it's from an alien river that almost killed me. Only downside to having water after all this time was, it reminded me of how empty my belly was. I heard a low growl and started to tense up, thinking there was some other alien thing out there, before I realized it was just my stomach telling me how pissed it was at me for not feeding it. Not much I could do to quell it either, considering there wasn't any kind of vegetation in sight, just the glowing city up ahead of us in the middle of a barren desert. The trees up above were the only thing I had seen resembling any kind of earth flora, and even then it was debatable if they were anything like ours. Besides, that's not even counting what could be poisonous for us to eat. Then we'd be in a whole other conundrum. Nothing to do about it but soldier on, I guess. Vitaly and I gathered ourselves, looking up at the cliffside as the creature finally gave up and turned back to the forest it came from. Ahead of us, the city was glowing with brilliant blue, beckoning us towards whatever new horror may be waiting for us. So how do we find this thing once we get there? I asked Vitaly, hoping for some kind of answer instead of just vague crypticism. It's under the city, she muttered, eyes focused on the glowing beacons ahead of us. As we got closer, I could see that the city wasn't just jutting rocks, but something much more intricate. There were actual buildings carved into these things. Windows looked over us from up high, though whether they were occupied or not, I honestly can't tell. As we approached smaller structures of rocks, whatever crystal was causing the glow began to dot the landscape, leading closer to the huge cluster that made up the city. The glow was almost blinding up close, but we could finally see it wasn't just sheer stone. There was more than windows and doors. There was nothing living in this place, but at one time it must have been something bustling. There was civilization here. Streets and paths were actually carved in between the huge, glowing buildings, with remains of things like stalls, carts. Proof that, well, saying people might be the wrong word, but there was intelligent society here at one time, living and bustling along with daily life, just like back on Earth. "Oh my god," Vitaly whispered. "We're not alone." Well, we might still be alone. I sighed, taking in the surroundings. Despite the signs of civilization, everything looked like it was in rough shape and had been for quite a while. What the hell could have done this? Some of the stalls still had small trinkets in them. Others were filled with bones of something, probably some form of butcher shop that people bought meat from. It all looked like it was just abandoned one day. Everyone just left. "Come on, we have to find a way underground now." Vitaly beckoned me further, moving towards the center of the city with a renewed vigor. "What are we supposed to be looking for?" I asked, checking our surroundings. I've got to say, it wasn't relieving having light all around me again. The glowing buildings gave everything this odd blue tint, making it all seem like we were buried deep under the ocean. Almost felt like it got hard to breathe the deeper in we got, especially as the buildings started to crowd in more, roads narrowing to small alleyways as Vitaly led the way towards some unknown passage. After a bit, she finally stopped, the road ahead dipping down suddenly towards a massive grate that had half the bars broken. Darkness was all I could see inside, with even the bright glow unable to force its way past the depths of black awaiting us. I looked around, wondering if there was anything I could break off to bring as a light source. The buildings in some areas were starting to crumble, and on the floor around them were small chunks that had broken off over time, still retaining their bright glow. Good a flashlight as any. I braced myself before picking it up, afraid it might burn from the intensity of the light. To my surprise though, it was cool, smooth, maintaining the same glow with no heat radiating from it. My awe overwhelmed my anxiety for a moment, turning it over in my hands and getting a feel. It wasn't necessarily stone, but some sort of crystal, almost giving me the same feeling as picking up sea glass on the beaches as a kid. Vitaly and I shared a look, both nodding before making our way down through the grate. The glow of the stone pierced through the dark, showing smooth stone walls that were almost as black as obsidian. We walked, footsteps echoing in the darkness, making it seem like there were hundreds of us marching downward to our death. The floor was on a constant slope downward, so much so that I had to keep myself from moving faster because of the steep incline it eventually became. We just kept going down though, the path occasionally winding around and around, turning this and that, making me even more disoriented than I had been back on the sunless surface, trying to make my way through the city. At some point, the narrow pathway widened out, leading us into a chamber where the walls were significantly lighter. As we approached one side, I noticed something carved into the walls, though it was in a language I couldn't understand. Some portions of it were intercut by drawings though. I followed along, trying to get an idea of what the hell this place was. The more I saw, the less things made sense. The first drawing showed an image of a giant. It was human-ish, I guess. Tall, arms and legs that were similar to ours but, well, more numerous. The arms were all stretching out from it in every direction, waving like tentacles but ending in human-like hands with long, jagged fingers. The face was human, but instead of just one at the front of the head, it had a mass of faces all forming into each other. Eyes, noses, more eyes. It went around the entire head. Each mouth between a set of eyes was filled with teeth and twisted in a mad snarl. Above its head floated a great ball of flame, shining light down on all. Around the giant figure were winged humanoid figures, all looking as if they were guarding it. The next picture showed the people on the ground being swallowed up by deep crevices that opened, huge, almost demonic figures climbing out of the cracks as more people fell in. Couldn't tell for sure, but it looked like the ones falling into the crevices were transforming, some in a halfway state as they were falling down deeper, becoming more demonic as they went. "Think this is what happened here?" I asked, looking at Vitaly as she gazed on in horror at the mural before us. This one was bigger, carved in intimate detail, depicting the giant god from the original, many faces all twisted in righteous anger, striking at a mass of serpentine creatures rising from the depths. There were smaller people like him flying on leathery wings around him, fighting against the demons crawling out of what looked a lot like the things that had attacked us, now that I saw the detail. On the ground were hundreds of smaller humans, all being slaughtered by the demonic creatures as they struck back at the ones above. In the background, the massive sun overhead was burning bright, flares bursting off of it like it was about to supernova and leave everything in darkness. "It is," Vitaly whispered. "I saw some parts of this in the dream." There was no mural depicting the end of the battle, ending on the incredible detail of the serpentine creature emerging fully, extending tendrils up to the heavens as the god struck at it. Whoever or whatever won the battle, I have no idea. The losers were very clear though, and there were a lot of them. Finally, after the end of that mural, there was a small door of stone. A relief in the middle glowed with a deep blue, beckoning Vitaly as she held a hand over it, hesitating for a moment before touching. As she did, the glow pulsed, growing outward and moving up the door, opening it from the middle as two halves retracted, showing us the world beyond. As it opened, I could see beyond, a brilliant light coming through. It was warm, like sunlight hitting my skin on a beautiful spring day. It felt like bliss, and as we made our way in, I could see the great star at the center of this world radiating warmth. It led us into an even greater chamber, hollowed out with just a small outcropping for us to stand on, a mechanism over to our right for unknown purposes. Before us though, in the chasm, was a small dying star. It flared out on occasion, sending bands of radiation and flame through the chamber, but never quite reaching as high as we were. As I looked above, I could see that the roof was smooth, carvings on the stone making complicated glyphs and letters in a language I couldn't understand. "Is this it?" I asked, looking over to Vitaly. She was already heading towards the mechanism though, pulling on one of the huge levers and setting something in motion. As a gear began to turn, the entire cavern started to rumble, making me crouch down and hold onto the floor below me as I tried retreating back towards the door. "What the hell are you doing?" "Setting it free," she said, pulling another lever that made things rumble even faster. I could see the sun flaring up even more as the cave above us began to open towards the pale dusk outside, illuminating the world beyond. The sun began to rise up, moving through the darkness as it waited for the gap to grow larger. For the first time in who knows how long, the sun was about to rise on this planet. As the door above opened up, a tendril of darkness suddenly shot through, piercing into the sun. The massive ball of light began to sputter, and I could vaguely see the image of a great being trapped inside of it, also skewered by the darkness coming through the crack above. The many faces were all pained, in massive terror at what was happening. But it was too late. More and more tendrils of darkness shot in through the widening gap, stabbing through the light and ensuring it would go out forever. Before Vitaly knew what was happening, she was screaming, looking onward as the previously flaring lights of the sun began to dissipate, the body inside crumbling to ash as the last of the fire went out. As it did, the darkness seeped in, oozing over every crevice as the sounds of the demons came from above. "Thank you," I heard a voice whisper in perfect English, but not audibly. No, it was speaking from somewhere far back in my mind, running over any mental fences as it invaded my thoughts. "What the hell?" I whispered, backing towards the doorway as I held the glowing stone up to see. The darkness was everywhere, permeating the depths of the chamber now that the sun was absent. Through it, I swear I could keep seeing brief glimpses of something, like stars in the cosmos. But then, as the darkness swirled, it was swallowed up once more. The dark was breathing, pulsing through as it encroached further on us. I saw Vitaly fall to her knees over by the contraption, looking at the ground. It tricked me," she whispered. I didn't have time to respond as the glowing stone in my hand began to fade out, all light leaving it now. I assumed the glowing city that was far above us was in the same situation because no light was permeating through the dark of the world above now. Instead, I could just hear hundreds of those things doing their whistle hisses, signaling to each other that they had won a great victory. How could I tell? I don't know. But I could feel the darkness staring at me intently. It was studying me, waiting for me to take another move. The things above were just waiting for us to come out to where they could reach, likely hearing from their friends how delicious we were after the darkness snuffed out the last bit of light. Too bad for them, there wasn't enough to go around. "Oh, I won't let them have you." I heard the voice again. "Who the fuck are you?" I shouted, far louder than intended. It got a reaction from the things up above, who started whistling with even more vigor as they heard that I was alive. A rock formed in my throat as life began to flash before my eyes. "Nothing you could comprehend." The voice came again. Tears began to form in my eyes, hot, stinging, and definitely against my will. Before I realized it, I was sobbing, hoping against some fucking hope that I would be able to make it out of here alive. I could hear Vitaly doing the same thing a few feet away. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She was heaving in forced words between huge gasps for air. The panic was setting in now, with nowhere else to go but flood out. "Don't be sorry for the weak." It came again. Before I knew it, the darkness was moving in on us, obscuring every bit of light around. I felt myself swallowed, suddenly cold as if there were buckets of ice dumped over me. My limbs became weightless, tossed around as I was pulled off the ground, down further into the darkness. I could see the edge of the small cliff in the chamber getting closer through the gloom. I couldn't do anything to stay away from it though, powerless to resist the pull of the dark. Instead, I fell right over, down into the chasm as it went ever deeper. It was even worse than the river, almost tearing me apart. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until it was ripped from my throat in a scream, as my limbs were stretched to either side of me, desperately trying to find anything to hold on to. All in vain. Eventually, I stopped struggling back, letting the darkness overtake me as I kept falling deeper and deeper into whatever hell was beyond here. I could only imagine what might be waiting on the other side, whether it was the flames of a biblical hell or just a mass of those damned creatures that killed the rest of the crew. I don't even know where Vitaly is at this point, off somewhere on her own, wrapped in her own blanket of darkness. I choked. I suddenly felt like I was drowning, the darkness forcing its way into my lungs and flooding them so I couldn't breathe. Sputtering, I started to flail, arms moving against the heavy force all around me. It felt like trying to run underwater, unable to get an actual hold on anything and desperately trying to fight my way free. Suddenly, before I knew it, the silence around me in the darkness is replaced by the crashing of waves. I get thrown hard into the ground, surf pounding my body as it washes over me, wave after wave. I try to force myself up, but fall as another wave hits me. My eyes are closed, but I can suddenly hear shouting all around me. Snippets of words saying to call an ambulance, asking where we came from. I can't make out the rest. What I know is that I can feel sunlight on my skin again, the gentle glow breaking through the cold of the water. I open my eyes against the stinging salt water, desperate to see if I was truly in hell, only to see others, humans, gathering around me, hauling my body from the surf. As I look over, I catch a glimpse of Vitaly, water spewing from her mouth as she coughs it from her lungs. She looked at me with terror in her eyes, in just the same state of confusion. We know where we just were, know what we saw, so how the hell did we get here? The last thing I hear before the darkness overtakes me, knocking me unconscious from the ordeal we've gone through, is the blare of sirens coming our way, like a loud whistle, breaking through the hiss of ocean waves.